I could barely breathe as I stared at the letter in my hands. I read it again. Then again. Hoping, praying, that somehow I had missed something. But no. There it was, plain as day, each word a blade to the heart. You're too old to matter anymore. It's time to step down. We've got this. What the hell? I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. I looked down at the letter again, hoping it was a mistake. But there it was, my son, my flesh and blood, had sent me this cold, heartless message. He was telling me I didn't matter anymore. That my years of hard work, sacrifice, the endless nights I spent away from my family to build this empire, it all meant nothing now. I couldn't understand it. How could he do this? After everything we'd been through, after everything I had given him, how could he just throw me away? I stood up, pacing around my office, clutching the letter in my hand. My mind was spinning. I couldn't think straight. How could this be happening? My son. He'd grown up with the company, watched me build it from the ground up. He had been the one I wanted to take over. I had trusted him. I had prepared him for this moment. But now? Now he was telling me that I was too old to matter? I couldn't contain the anger building inside me. It was a fire, a heat spreading through my chest. I wanted to scream, to throw the damn letter, to throw something, anything, just to get the rage out. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. He had always been the one, hadn't he? The one I'd put everything into. The one I had worked late for, missing birthdays, missing holidays, all for him. For us. For the future I had planned for both of us. The future where he would take the reins, where we would work together. Too old to matter? The words echoed in my head like a slap. The pain of them. The coldness. I didn't even know what to think anymore. My mind was a storm of confusion, anger, hurt. This wasn't just about business. This wasn't about a company or money. This was personal. This was about me being discarded, left behind like I was nothing. I stood still for a moment, my hands clenched into fists. How could he think this was okay? How could he think he could just push me out like this? It was like a stab to my chest, and I had no idea how to pull it out. Too old to matter. I wanted to call him, to demand an explanation, to make him understand what this was doing to me. But then I thought, what would I say? What would he even say? He'd probably say it was just business. That it wasn't personal. That I was standing in the way of progress. But how could he not see it? How could he not see that it was personal? That this was about us, our family, our history, everything we built together. I ran my hands over my face, trying to steady myself, trying to calm the fire inside. But it wouldn't go away. It burned harder, deeper, until I felt like I might lose control. Too old to matter? How could he think that? After everything I did for him, everything I sacrificed, he thought I was just some old relic? I read the letter again, hoping somehow the words would change, but they never did. They were just as cold, just as final. There was no apology, no gratitude. Just a sharp, cutting finality. I read that letter 3 times before it even began to make sense. I muttered under my breath. My own son, my flesh and blood, telling me I was nothing anymore. I wanted to scream, but all I could hear was the thumping of my own heart, pounding in my ears. Too old to matter? What did that even mean? I stood there, frozen, feeling the sting of betrayal. This wasn't just about the company, it was about him. It was about him telling me that I was no longer worth anything to him. My thoughts kept racing back to all the years I spent building this company. All the nights I worked late, all the sacrifices, all the things I missed, all of it for him. For us. So he could take this company. So we could grow it together. So he could take the reins when the time was right. But now he wanted me gone. Just like that. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breath. I couldn't believe it. My head was spinning. My heart was racing. The feeling of being discarded, thrown away, by someone I loved was suffocating. I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. I wanted to lash out. I wanted to scream. I wanted to make him understand the depth of what he had done. But I knew, deep down, that wouldn't do any good. I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. Not until I figured out what to do next. I turned to my phone, staring at the screen for a long moment, the message from him still there. The silence in the room felt deafening. I didn't know what to do. But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. He might think he'd won, but he had no idea what he was up against. Too old to matter? We'd see about that. Do you know what it feels like to be discarded by your own flesh and blood? I asked aloud, though no one was there to hear. Leave a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. Let's see how far this story reaches. I didn't know why I said that. Maybe I needed someone to understand. Someone to hear me. Or maybe it was just a way to reach out and make myself feel heard. But I wasn't ready to talk to him just yet. Not until I figured out what came next. I grabbed my jacket and walked out of my office. The game had just begun. I can still remember the first time I took him to the office. He was barely 10, holding my hand with that little boy grip that always seemed so strong, even though it was nothing more than a touch. I'd promised him that one day, this place would be his. I had dreams for him, dreams I thought he'd carry with him. I had worked late into the night, often missing dinners, weekends, and birthdays. But it was all for him. Every sacrifice, every lost moment, was meant to build a future for him. A future where he could take over when the time came. I remember those afternoons when he would come into my office after school, his backpack slung over his shoulder, his face lit up with excitement. I'd show him the numbers, the balance sheets, the decisions I'd made. He'd sit there, absorbing it all. I thought he was learning. I thought he was preparing to take the reins. I even let him make decisions, small ones at first, choosing suppliers, approving designs, making calls. It felt like the right thing to do. He was the one who would keep this business alive. He was the one I trusted. And then, when he was older, I gave him more. The bigger decisions. The ones that truly mattered. I pushed him, not because I didn't think he could handle it, but because I wanted him to see that everything I did was for him. That the hard choices were made for his future. But I'd never asked him if he wanted it. Never really considered if he even cared about the business. Or if he was just going through the motions because that was what I expected of him. I wanted him to take it all. Wanted him to understand the value of what I'd built. But now I wonder if he ever truly saw it for what it was. Or if he saw it as a burden. Maybe that's why he did this. Maybe he just wanted to be free of it. Free of me. I remember the day I gave him the keys to the office. The pride in his eyes, the way his shoulders stood a little taller. I'd thought that was the moment. The moment I could step back, rest, knowing I had done my job. But now, it felt like that moment had been a trap. A lie. It wasn't a passing of the torch. It was a severing of ties. He had been preparing to take over for years, but I never thought it would happen like this. Never thought it would come with such a brutal, heartless farewell. My mind kept returning to that night. The night we had sat together in my study, talking about the future. I had told him, one day, this will be yours. He smiled, said he understood, that he was ready. And I believed him. Had he been lying to me? Or had everything changed without me realizing it? I thought I had prepared him for the weight of this company, for the responsibility that came with it. But now, I couldn't help but think that I had failed him in some way. Maybe he never wanted it. Maybe he never wanted to be like me. Maybe, deep down, he resented me for putting all of this on his shoulders. I rubbed my hands over my face, the weight of everything sinking deeper into my chest. The past was never as clear as it seemed when you were living it. Now that I looked back, the memories were tinged with bitterness and regret. There had been a time when I thought I was building a legacy, a bridge for him to walk across. But now it felt like I was the one who had walked over it and left him behind. He never asked for this. Maybe he never wanted to be the man I was making him into. The letter, the betrayal, felt like the culmination of all those years. The years of pushing him. The years of showing him what he should want, what he should be. It wasn't about what he wanted. It was about what I had hoped for him, what I had decided for him. And now, I saw it. The seeds of resentment I hadn't noticed. The ache inside me turned into something else. It was no longer just heartbreak. It was anger. I had done everything for him. Everything. But now, it was clear. He was done with me. He didn't need me anymore. He didn't need anything I had worked for. I felt the loss, the crushing weight of it, as if the years of building, of giving everything I had been nothing. But it wasn't just the business. It was the father and son I had thought we were. And now I had nothing. Do you know what it feels like to be discarded by your own flesh and blood? The words came out again, heavy with meaning. The past echoed in my mind, crashing against the present. I had been a father, a mentor, a leader. But right now, I was none of those things. I was just a man sitting in the ruins of everything I had believed in. I wasn't expecting the call. I didn't even want it. But there it was, ringing in my ear, dragging me from the thoughts that had been swirling around in my head. I let it ring twice before answering. "Richard," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I know this isn't easy for you." Richard's voice came through, low and steady, his usual calm a contrast to the storm inside me. Richard had been with me since the early days. He was one of the few who truly understood what I'd built, and why. His loyalty had never wavered, not even when things got tough. So when he spoke, I knew it came from a place of genuine concern. "I've been following what's been happening, and I wanted to offer you something." He paused, as if weighing his words carefully. "A way out. A quiet exit. You can walk away from all this, take some time for yourself. It's been a hell of a ride, hasn't it?" I leaned back in my chair, letting his words sink in. A way out. It sounded so simple. Maybe too simple. He wanted me to walk away quietly. No noise, no drama. Just fade into the background while my son took over. But the thought of just letting go, it felt like I'd be giving up, like I was conceding to everything my son had done. It wasn't just about the company anymore. It was about me. About my pride. About the years I'd spent building something for him, only to be discarded like an old tool. "No," I muttered, more to myself than to him. "I can't just walk away." Richard didn't push. He understood. But he continued, his voice calm, almost soothing. "I know it's hard. But there's also another option. If you don't want to go quietly, you don't have to. You've still got power. The board's behind you, and we both know your son isn't ready to handle things. Not without you. You can come back. Take control. Put things back in your hands." His words hung in the air, heavy with possibilities. Come back. Take control. My mind raced. The idea of returning, of reclaiming what was mine, was tempting. I could feel the fire burning again, the need to prove myself. To show my son that I wasn't done, that I wasn't some forgotten relic. But at what cost? I had already sacrificed so much for this company. For him. Did I really want to throw my son's life into turmoil just to satisfy my own pride? "Think about it," Richard said. "You don't have to let him win like this. You've worked too hard to just walk away and let him take everything you've built." I stood up from my chair, walking over to the window. The city spread out before me. The sun was starting to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the streets below. Everything I'd built was right there, visible in front of me, yet slipping through my fingers like sand. I thought about my son. I thought about all the years I spent teaching him, guiding him, pushing him to be the man I thought he could be. But now he was standing on the other side, looking at me as if I were nothing, like I had no value. But was that my fault? Had I pushed him too hard? Or was he just too arrogant to see what I had given him? I could let it go. Let him have the company. Let him live his life without me. He was right. Too old to matter. But did I really want to live with that? To know I just faded away, leaving everything I'd built behind? I thought about Richard's offer. A quiet exit. A peaceful retreat from it all. But I wasn't sure I could do that. "No," I said again. This time with more conviction. "I won't walk away. Not now. Not like this. Richard was silent for a moment. So you're going to fight him, then? I'm going to take back what's mine, I replied, my voice sharp. And when I do, he'll regret thinking he could do this to me. Richard didn't say anything for a moment, but I could hear the faint approval in his silence. He knew how much this meant to me. I turned away from the window, feeling the weight of the decision settling in my chest. There was no going back now. The fight was on. But a part of me couldn't help but wonder. Was it worth it? I couldn't just walk in, shout at him, and take back control. That would be too easy, too messy. I wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of seeing me lose my temper. No, this had to be done quietly. Calculated. Precision. The board was the key. They were the ones who kept everything moving, and they had always been loyal to me. I'd built that loyalty over years, one decision at a time. It wasn't something my son understood yet. He had no idea how to manage those relationships. But I did. I spent the next few days going over old reports, old emails, old conversations, anything I could find that might help me make my move. I knew the cracks in the company, the places where the foundation was weak. And those were the places I was going to exploit. The first step was small, almost invisible. I called in a few favors, got the right people in the right positions, without anyone noticing. People who knew the ropes, who knew how to get things done without anyone asking questions. I wasn't looking for a showdown. I was looking for a quiet shift, a subtle hand on the wheel. It wasn't about sabotaging the company, not at all. It was about making sure that my son understood something. I wasn't done yet. The first time I saw him looking confused, I knew I was on the right path. He stood in the boardroom, holding a file in his hand, scanning the table as if something wasn't adding up. His brow furrowed, and I could see the frustration beginning to seep in. He had the confidence of someone who thought he had it all figured out, but he didn't. Not yet. I leaned back in my office chair, watching him through the glass. It felt good to see him struggle. Not because I hated him, but because it was a reminder. He didn't know this company the way I did. He hadn't lived it, breathed it, worked his fingers to the bone to make sure it survived. It wasn't just about the business. It was about proving a point. I wasn't just the founder anymore. I was the one who could still move the pieces, still make the right calls when it mattered. The next step was simple. I started taking advantage of the small missteps he made. His decisions were impulsive, too quick, too eager. He didn't think through the consequences. So, I took the time to fix things quietly. I made sure the issues didn't reach the public or the board. A little misdirection here, a quick change there. No one noticed, not yet. But things started to feel off. The cracks started to appear. By the time he figured out that something was wrong, it was too late. His confidence began to slip. He started questioning things that he had once taken for granted. Why wasn't the new marketing strategy working? Why was his chosen team suddenly at odds with him? Why did the numbers look different from the projections he'd made? He started to doubt himself. And that's when I knew I had him. He couldn't see me, couldn't understand what was happening. He just knew that something was wrong. But I wasn't going to confront him directly. Not yet. That wouldn't do. I wanted him to experience this slowly, to feel the weight of his mistakes, without me saying a word. I was going to let him sink himself, little by little, until he had no choice but to come crawling back to me. The tension was building. I could feel it in the air, an undercurrent that no one was talking about, but that everyone could sense. The employees whispered about the tension in the halls. The board members exchanged nervous glances. My son, oblivious to it all, kept pushing forward, trying to force things into place. But the cracks kept spreading. I wanted to tell him, to sit him down and explain why I was doing this. But I knew I couldn't. Not yet. Not until he understood the price of pride. Until he realized that you don't just get to step into a role without truly understanding what it means. Until he understood that the company wasn't just something to be inherited, it was something to be earned. He hadn't earned it yet. And until he did, I was going to make sure he felt the consequences of his actions. I didn't need to be the loudest person in the room. I just needed to be the one who could move the chess pieces when no one was looking. And I knew this was only the beginning. I could see it in his eyes. The tension, the frustration. The way his shoulders sagged a little more with every passing day. My son was unraveling. He just didn't know it yet. I'd been watching him closely. At first, he handled the pressure well, or at least that's how it appeared. He had the bravado, the confidence of someone who thought they had it all figured out. But under that facade, the cracks were starting to show. And I couldn't help but feel a sick sense of satisfaction every time I saw it. He would sit at the head of the table during meetings, his voice a little too loud, his decisions a little too rushed. Every time he made a move, I could see the ripples. Something wasn't working the way it should, and it wasn't his fault, not entirely. It was my fault. But only because I had set him up for failure without him even knowing. Small things. Minor disruptions that no one else seemed to notice. A botched deal here, a missed deadline there. The team he'd assembled was crumbling under the pressure. I could see the anxiety in their eyes when they'd come to him with questions he couldn't answer. I didn't make any grand gestures. No, I worked in the shadows, pulling strings, making sure everything slipped just slightly out of his control. Just enough to keep him on edge. At first, I thought it would be easy, just a few small mistakes to keep him from feeling too confident. But as I watched him struggle, a new emotion began to stir inside me, guilt. It was a strange feeling, guilt mixed with satisfaction. Why am I doing this? I wondered. It felt like watching someone drowning, knowing you could throw them a lifeline, but refusing to do so. It wasn't about watching him suffer. It was about showing him the value of what he was trying to take. Making him see that this wasn't just a game. But even as I plotted, the guilt gnawed at me. I knew I should feel bad for him, but I didn't. Not yet. He had to learn. This wasn't just about the company. It was about him understanding that nothing comes without consequence. He couldn't just step into my shoes without learning how heavy they were first. I had given him everything. The tools. The resources. The knowledge. And yet, I saw him floundering. I could hear the frustration in his voice when he called the team to another late-night meeting, trying to piece things together. He was running out of answers, and that was exactly how I wanted it. The clock was ticking. Every second he spent trying to fix something that wasn't his fault was another moment I knew he couldn't afford to waste. He needed to face the consequences of his decisions. You don't get to take over without earning it, son. I didn't want to destroy him. I didn't want to break him. But I couldn't let him take this company without understanding what it truly meant to lead it. It was my pride, yes, but more than that, it was the principle. He had to see the weight of what I had built. What he had taken. I caught a glimpse of him one afternoon, standing in front of a whiteboard filled with numbers, his face tight with concentration. He wiped his brow and sighed. I could tell he was barely holding on. But the strangest part was this. Part of me wanted to step in and help him. To fix everything for him, like I had done so many times before. But I couldn't. Not now. I thought back to the night I'd handed him the keys to the office. I thought about how proud he had looked, how I had believed he would rise to the challenge. The thing is, I was afraid of what would happen if I handed it to him too easily. But as the days dragged on, I felt something else creeping up on me. A fear I hadn't anticipated. What if I was wrong? What if this was a mistake? I caught myself thinking about the company more often than I should have. About the future, about the legacy I was leaving behind. What if it all fell apart because I couldn't let go? Each failure, each mistake, chipped away at my son's confidence. And as I watched him falter, I couldn't help but feel the weight of my decisions. The guilt started to settle deeper inside me. But there was no going back now. Not until he saw the truth for himself. I had to make sure he felt it. The pressure, the responsibility, the cost of pride. But I wasn't sure how much longer I could watch him struggle before I broke. It started subtly, at first. Small jabs in meetings, comments that seemed innocent but carried an undercurrent of doubt. I had been watching him carefully, but I didn't expect him to take it this far. Then came the public display. I wasn't prepared for that. I never thought my son would go so far as to try and humiliate me in front of the board. I thought he would at least have the decency to handle his frustration behind closed doors. But no. He stood up, during one of our most crucial meetings, and threw my decisions right back in my face. "It's clear we're going in the wrong direction," he said, voice cold, not even a trace of affection in his tone. "We need to reassess the approach, and frankly, we need to leave behind some of the outdated practices that my father is so fond of." He didn't even look at me as he said it. It was like I was a complete stranger, just another obstacle to be removed. The room fell silent, but the damage was already done. I could feel every eye in that room shift toward me, expectant, waiting for my response. My heart raced, my fists clenched under the table. This was no longer just about the company. This was about respect. About my place. About my legacy. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat. I couldn't just let it slide. I couldn't let him think that he could do this to me without consequence. But at the same time, a wave of doubt washed over me. Was I really prepared to destroy my relationship with my son? Was this worth it? I had spent years building this company, making tough decisions, carrying the weight of responsibility for everyone. My employees, my family, my son. And now, here he was, actively trying to undermine everything I had worked for. But as the anger surged, I couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. This wasn't how I had imagined it. Revenge, this war I had been fighting from the shadows, wasn't as sweet as I had imagined. I took a deep breath, my mind swirling. This wasn't just business anymore. This was personal. And every moment of weakness, every misstep I made now, felt like I was losing a part of myself. Am I becoming the villain in my own story? I looked at my son. His expression was determined, his eyes fixed on the board, expecting approval. For a moment, I saw the little boy I used to take to the office. I saw the boy who had trusted me, who looked up to me. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who seemed more interested in proving something than in understanding the weight of the responsibility he had been handed. The room was still, the tension hanging in the air, but no one spoke up to defend me. No one offered an apology on my behalf. I could feel the respect I had once commanded slipping away. This is it. This is the moment I lose everything. I could have fought back. Could have reminded him of the years I'd spent building this company. Could have told him that he didn't know the first thing about sacrifice. But the words wouldn't come. Not because I didn't have the power to say them, but because I wasn't sure if I wanted to fight anymore. I had spent so much time planning this, so many late nights strategizing. But now, faced with the reality of what was happening, I couldn't help but wonder. Was I fighting for the right reasons? Was this about protecting my legacy? Or was it about proving something to him? I could hear my son's voice in my head, his words like daggers. It's time to step aside. We've got this. His betrayal was still fresh, cutting through everything I thought I knew about our relationship. But now, as I sat there, facing the fallout, I realized something. The pain wasn't just in losing the company, it was in losing him. The trust one thought we had, the bond that I believed we shared, had shattered in that moment. All the years of sacrifice, all the love I had poured into him, it was gone. And no matter how much I fought, no matter how many moves I made, I couldn't get it back. My thoughts were a mess, anger, confusion, regret, all swirling together. How could he do this? After everything, how could he just discard me like this? But I did the same thing to him, didn't I? I had pushed him into this role. I had expected him to be something he wasn't ready to be. The internal conflict grew. I couldn't fight with him the way I had planned. But I couldn't back down, either. If I let him take everything without a fight, what did that say about me? I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of the moment, feeling the burn of betrayal still smoldering in my chest. We'll discuss this further, I said, my voice cold and steady, even though I felt anything but calm. And with that, I walked out. It wasn't over. Not yet. But I had no idea what the cost of this war would be. I had reached the point of no return. There was no more hesitation, no more second guessing. The time for subtlety was over. My son thought he had one, that he had taken everything from me. But what he didn't realize was that I had been biding my time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I had built this company on decisions like this, decisions that required finesse, precision, and an understanding of power. He had played his part, and now it was my turn to play mine. I knew exactly what to do. The board was already on shaky ground, and my son had given me all the ammunition I needed. The financial situation was more fragile than anyone had realized. His quick decisions, his impatience, had left the company vulnerable. The leverage I had was right there in front of me. I had spent weeks setting this up, quietly, behind the scenes. I had called in favors from old contacts, from people who owed me. A few strategic transfers of funds, a timely reallocation of shares, it was all coming together. It wasn't just about controlling the company anymore. It was about showing him exactly who was in charge. I sat in my office, looking over the final documents one last time. The weight of what I was about to do pressed on me, but I didn't feel fear. I felt power. This was my moment. When I pulled the trigger, it was fast. A few key transactions, a few well-timed calls, and the money started to move. Shares were reassigned, positions changed, and just like that, I had regained control. It wasn't public, not yet, but the key players knew. They saw the shift. They understood what had just happened. I let the silence settle, the weight of what I had done sinking in. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to smile. I had done it. The company was mine again. And when I looked at the numbers, I knew my son couldn't fix this. Not without my approval. He wouldn't even see it coming. But he would feel it. The next morning, he called me into his office. His face was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he sat behind his desk. I could see the strain in his eyes, the weight of everything finally catching up to him. He had no idea what had just happened. He thought he still had control. He thought he could still fix everything. "Dad, what the hell is going on?" His voice cracked with frustration. "What did you do? The numbers don't add up. The board's moving in ways I didn't approve. The funds are all over the place. What's happening?" I leaned against the doorframe, my posture relaxed, my face calm. This was the moment I had been waiting for. "You've lost, son," I said, my voice even, but with a hint of finality. "You thought you could push me out. You thought you could do this on your own. But you're not ready. You never were. The company was never yours to take. It was mine, and it's still mine." His face turned white as the truth hit him. He had been played. Every move he made had been carefully counted, each decision undermined in the shadows. And now, it was too late. The company was back under my control, and he couldn't do anything about it. You did this," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You pulled all the strings." His voice trembled with a mix of disbelief and anger, but more than anything, there was a sense of betrayal in his eyes. I stepped forward, watching the realization dawn on him. "Yes, I did. I always knew you weren't ready, and now you've learned it the hard way." For a moment, we stood there, both of us facing the wreckage of what had just happened. His world had just shattered, and for a split second, I could see the boy I had raised, the boy who had trusted me, who had looked up to me. But it was gone now. The trust, the respect, the bond we once had, it was all gone. I turned to leave, but before I reached the door, I paused. "You wanted control. You wanted to push me out. Well, congratulations. You've got nothing now. I've taken back what's mine." He didn't say anything. He just stared at me, eyes filled with a mixture of rage, confusion, and hurt. I walked out of the office, leaving him there. The door slammed behind me, and I knew in that moment, there was no going back. This was the final move. The battle was over. I had reclaimed my power. I knew it was coming. It was only a matter of time before my son realized what had happened. He'd been so sure of himself. Too sure, really. He had thought he could take control without understanding what it meant to lead. And now, as I sat behind my desk, watching him pace back and forth. I could feel the weight of his realization settling in. "I don't understand," he muttered, barely above a whisper, his voice strained. "How could this happen? How could I let this happen?" He had called me into his office again. This time, there was no bravado in his voice, no confidence in his posture. Just desperation. I could see it in his eyes. The panic, the dawning comprehension of the magnitude of his mistakes. He had been in charge, but now, with everything unraveling around him, he was helpless. "Dad, you have to help me," he pleaded, his voice cracking as he sat on the edge of his desk. I didn't see it. I didn't know what I was doing. "You've got to fix this. Please." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms, letting the silence stretch between us. This was the moment. This was what I had been working toward. He was finally seeing the consequences of his rash decisions, the weight of every move he made without considering the long-term effects. But the strange thing was, I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel joy or pride. I only felt an emptiness. His words echoed in my mind. "You have to help me." Help him? How could I help him now? I had made my move, played my cards, taken back what was mine. But the feeling of victory wasn't what I had imagined. There was no triumph in seeing my son broken before me. There was only a hollow ache in my chest, the realization that this wasn't how I wanted it to end. He looked at me, his face pale, his hands trembling. He was no longer the confident young man who thought he could replace me, the one who believed he could run things better than I ever had. Now, he was a boy, a child, asking for help when it was too late. "I was wrong," he said, his voice barely audible. "I thought I could do it. I thought I could be what you wanted me to be. But I wasn't ready. I didn't." He stopped himself, looking down at his hands as if searching for the right words. "I didn't understand what this company means. What you've given up for it. I didn't understand what I was throwing away." I wanted to say something. I wanted to tell him that he still had time to fix it, that it wasn't too late. But I couldn't. The words felt stuck in my throat, suffocating me. Because the truth was, I didn't know if I wanted him to fix it. The company was mine again. Yes. But what did it cost me? What had I lost in the process? "You were too proud," I said, my voice quiet, cold. "Too eager to prove something. And now, look at where we are." He nodded, his eyes welling with tears. "I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted to prove that I could do it. I didn't think this would happen." The reality hit him like a wave. His arrogance had cost him everything. The board was now questioning his ability to lead, his decisions were under scrutiny, and the company he thought he could control was starting to crumble. He reached for his phone, attempting to call someone, anyone. But the expression on his face told me all I needed to know. It was already too late. The damage was done, and the financial fallout was only the beginning. There was no quick fix, no magic solution that could erase his mistakes. For the first time, I saw him for what he truly was. A man who had been humbled by the consequences of his own actions. A man who had thought he was invincible, only to find that the weight of responsibility could break him. And then it hit me. The regret wasn't just his. It was mine, too. I had made him into this. I had pushed him, expecting him to become the man I wanted him to be. And now, looking at him in front of me, I realized the price of that expectation. The price of my own pride. "I never wanted this," I said, my voice softer now, not with anger, but with something else, something that felt like resignation. "I never wanted to see you fail. But you forced my hand." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. The truth was written all over his face. His pride had been his downfall. And mine, too. I stood up, walking slowly to the door. He didn't follow me. He didn't say anything else. I left without looking back, but as I walked down the hallway, I couldn't shake the feeling that the battle might be over, but the war had left us both with scars. I sat in my office, the familiar hum of the city outside blending into the silence of the room. The company was mine again, but it didn't feel like a victory. The feeling I had expected, triumph, satisfaction, relief, was absent. All I felt was emptiness. I looked at the view from my window, the same view I had gazed at countless times before, but it felt different now. Was it always this empty? The skyline stretched before me, a symbol of everything I had worked for. But as I watched the traffic moving below, I couldn't shake the thought that it all meant nothing now. The company was back in my hands. Yes. The board was on my side again, and the numbers were looking good, but I couldn't help but feel the weight of the cost. My son, the one I had worked so hard for, the one I had poured all my time and energy into, was gone. Not physically, but emotionally. He was distant now. The bond between us, once so strong, was shattered. He barely spoke to me anymore. And when he did, his words were cold, devoid of the warmth they once had. I thought back to the night he confronted me in his office. The look on his face, the confusion, the hurt, the realization that he had lost everything, was seared into my memory. But the hardest part wasn't watching him crumble. The hardest part was knowing that I had been the one to break him. I had fought for my company, for my legacy, but I had done it at the expense of my family. I had sacrificed my relationship with my son, with my wife. We were all fractured now, scattered pieces of what we once were. My son had been my pride, my hope for the future. I had raised him to take over, to carry on the work I had started, but somewhere along the way, I had lost sight of what truly mattered. The power, the control, it was all mine again. But as I sat there, staring at the paperwork, I realized something I hadn't wanted to face before. Success without love, without trust, was hollow. I had one, but at what cost? I had always thought that reclaiming the company would make everything right, that the feeling of being in control would fix the cracks in my life. But it didn't. It only made them more visible. I had built this empire, but in the process, I had torn apart the very thing I valued most, my family. My son no longer looked up to me the way he once had. The trust between us was gone, replaced by resentment and bitterness. And my wife? She had been silent for days, her eyes filled with disappointment, as if she, too, understood the price of what I had done. I thought about all the late nights I had spent in this office, all the hours I had missed with my family, all the moments I had sacrificed for the sake of the business. Was it worth it? I had been so focused on building something lasting that I had failed to realize the damage I was doing along the way. I had sacrificed my relationship with my son for the very thing that I had promised him, the company. But now, I realized it was never just about the company. It was about the connection between us. And that connection was broken. I stood up, walking over to the window again, looking at the city below, but this time, it felt even more distant. The skyline, the lights, the noise, it all seemed like it belonged to someone else. Someone who had the luxury of enjoying success without wondering if it was all worth it. But I didn't have that luxury. I was left here, with the remnants of everything I had fought for, wondering if it was too late to fix it. Too late to mend the relationship with my son. Too late to rebuild what I had lost. I had gotten the company back. But at what price? I had everything I had ever wanted, and yet, I had nothing. The emptiness in my chest grew, the realization settling in like a heavy weight. Power and success didn't mean a damn thing without the love and trust one once had. I took one last look at the city before I turned away from the window. What now? The cost of winning had been higher than I ever imagined. And now, I had to face the consequences of my actions, alone. I had spent so much time consumed with anger, with proving my worth, with showing my son that I wasn't ready to fade away. I had fought back with everything I had, and now, here I was, standing in front of him again. But this time, it was different. I wasn't angry anymore. The rage that had fueled me for so long had burned out, leaving only the remnants of something deeper, something raw. He was sitting at his desk, his hands folded in front of him, staring at the papers in front of him, but his eyes were distant. I could tell he wasn't really looking at them. He was lost in his thoughts, the same thoughts that had plagued him for days. Dad, his voice broke through the silence, shaky. What do you want from me? It was the question I had been dreading, but one that I knew needed to be asked. What did I want from him? What was I hoping to accomplish with all of this? The truth was, I had wanted something that had been right in front of me the whole time. His love. His trust. The bond we once shared. I took a deep breath, stepping into the room and closing the door behind me. The words felt heavier now, but they needed to be said. I don't want anything from you, I said quietly, my voice surprisingly steady. Not anymore. Not in the way I thought I did. He looked up at me then, his eyes tired, as if he hadn't slept in days. His lips parted to say something, but he hesitated. There was something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. Vulnerability. I know you're angry, I continued, my voice softening. I know you feel betrayed, that you've lost everything. But I want you to understand something. I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it because I was trying to protect you. His brow furrowed, confusion written all over his face. Protect me? How? By taking everything from me? By setting me up to fail? I shook my head. No. By teaching you. By showing you the consequences of your actions. You've always wanted to do things your way, but you never understood the weight of what I built. You never understood what it takes to make the right choices. I was trying to prepare you, not punish you. There was a long pause. I could feel the tension hanging in the air, but I pressed on. This wasn't about anger anymore. This was about the truth. I've always loved you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. More than anything. Every decision I made, every hour I worked late, every sacrifice I made, it was all for you. For your future. I wanted you to have something to carry on. But I made a mistake. I pushed you too hard. I expected too much. The room was quiet, save for the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. He didn't speak at first, but his eyes began to soften, the walls he had built up slowly crumbling. You were always my pride, I said, stepping closer. And maybe I tried to make you something you weren't ready to be. I pushed you into a role that you weren't prepared for, that I wasn't prepared for. But I didn't know any other way. All I knew was the company, the business. And I thought that was all you needed to see, to understand. But I was wrong. He swallowed hard, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. He looked down at the desk, unable to meet my gaze, as if he couldn't bear the weight of my words. And for the first time in a long while, I saw the boy I used to know, the one who looked up to me with trust in his eyes. I was so caught up in proving I could do it, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I didn't see what I was doing to you. To us. I stepped closer, placing a hand on the edge of his desk, my heart heavy with regret and hope. We both made mistakes. But we still have a chance. To fix this. To rebuild. He looked up at me then, his eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and something else, something that resembled hope. I don't know how to fix this, he said softly. But I want to try. I want to learn. To be better. To be the son you need me to be. I felt a lump form in my throat. For the first time in what felt like years, the air between us wasn't thick with anger or resentment. It was thick with something else, a quiet, fragile understanding. I don't need you to be anything other than yourself, I said, my voice breaking. I just need you to be here. With me. I need us to be here. We stood there for a moment, both of us silent, the weight of everything that had happened settling between us. There were no grand gestures, no sweeping proclamations of forgiveness, just a quiet understanding. The damage had been done. Yes. But maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for healing. For redemption. For reconciliation. I reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. My son, my flesh and blood. Finally seeing him for who he truly was, flaws and all. And maybe that was enough. Maybe it had always been enough. I sat at the dinner table, the familiar clink of silverware against plates ringing in the quiet. The room felt smaller somehow, tighter, as though the weight of everything that had happened had condensed into this single moment. My wife sat across from me, her eyes distant, her smile barely there. It wasn't the same. We weren't the same. And then there was him. My son. He sat at the end of the table, his eyes downcast, pushing food around on his plate, but not really eating. His silence was the loudest thing in the room. It had been like this for weeks. We had gone from a family that talked, laughed, even argued, to a family that barely spoke at all. The space between us was thick, filled with so much unspoken hurt. But today, for some reason, I felt different. The anger that had driven me, the resentment I had carried for so long, was starting to dissipate. It wasn't gone completely, but it didn't have the same weight it used to. I had done what I thought was necessary, but now, I was left to deal with the fallout. And the thing that gnawed at me the most wasn't the company, it was the silence. The rift between us. I glanced at my son. He caught my gaze for a brief moment, then quickly looked away. His face was hard, his expression guarded. But there was something else, something softer underneath it all. He wasn't angry anymore. He was just lost. I could see it in the way he carried himself, in the way he held back from engaging with me or his mother. I could have pushed him, could have demanded that he open up, that he confront everything head-on. But I didn't. Not yet. I had already pushed him too much, too fast. This time, I knew I had to wait for him to come to me, to let him find his own way back. But it hurt. It hurt more than I could have imagined, to sit there, side by side, and feel like we were strangers. After a long stretch of silence, I put down my fork, looking across the table at my wife. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of something. Maybe hope, maybe understanding. Maybe it's time we start talking again, I said softly, my voice rough. Not about the company, not about what happened, just us. Her eyes softened, and she nodded, the hint of a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. It's a start, she replied. I turned my attention back to my son, and I saw it. His eyes flickered to mine, just for a second. I didn't speak right away, didn't push. I just waited, as patient as I could be. And then, slowly, he set his fork down, his shoulders loosening just a little. He paused, clearly unsure of where to begin. I don't know where to start, Dad. It wasn't much, but it was something. And that something meant more than I could say. You don't have to start anywhere, I said quietly. Just be here. That's enough. There was another pause, but this time, it wasn't filled with tension. It felt almost comfortable. We weren't fixed, not by a long shot. But this was the beginning. This was us trying again, trying to rebuild something that had been broken. And that was more than I could have hoped for. I've missed this, my son said, his voice quieter now, less guarded. I've missed you. I didn't realize how much until everything started falling apart. I nodded, feeling the weight of those words settle inside me. I missed you too, I wanted to say. But I didn't need to. We both knew it. For the rest of the meal, we didn't talk about the company. We didn't talk about the past. We just ate. It was small, insignificant, but for us, it was huge. It was a step in the right direction, a crack in the wall we had both built around ourselves. The silence wasn't suffocating anymore. It was just the space we needed to breathe. After dinner, I took a walk outside, my hands shoved deep into my pockets. The evening air was cool, and the city buzzed quietly around me, but I didn't mind. I had everything I needed right here. I had my company, yes, but I had more than that now. I had a chance to rebuild the most important relationship in my life. A chance to heal, to forgive, to be a father again. And that was worth more than any victory, more than anything money could buy. The weight of the decision hung over me like a storm cloud that wouldn't break. I sat alone in my office, staring at the papers in front of me. Everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed, was now in my hands again. The company was thriving, the numbers were right, the board was behind me. I had done it. I had reclaimed everything. But now, I was faced with a choice that felt heavier than any financial decision I had ever made. What now? I could stay. I could keep leading, keep holding on to what I had built, continue being the figurehead of this empire. The thought of it stirred something in me, a sense of pride, of purpose. I had spent my whole life working toward this, ensuring its survival, guarding its future. But every time I considered the future of the company, I couldn't shake the image of my son. The way he had looked at me when we began to rebuild. The look of uncertainty mixed with hope. It wasn't just about the company anymore. It was about him. About us. I could feel the weight of the past, the choices I had made, pushing me toward one direction. But I also knew that this wasn't just my decision to make anymore. The company, the legacy I had built, needed to be more than just an extension of my own will. It needed to be something my son could take over. Something that would allow him to grow, to learn, to make it his own. And that realization struck me harder than anything else. My son was ready. He wasn't the man I had expected him to be. But in that difference, I saw something I hadn't seen before. He was his own person now. And for the first time, I could see him standing on his own 2 feet, no longer under my shadow, but in his own light. The phone buzzed on my desk. I glanced at it. A message from him. "Dad, can we talk?" I stared at it for a moment. This was it. The moment where I had to decide what came next. What we would do next. I could hear his voice in my mind. The uncertainty, the regret, the pain of all we had been through. But underneath it all, there was something else now. Trust. A trust that had been broken, yes, but had also begun to heal. We had started rebuilding, slowly but surely. And in that, there was hope. I stood up from my desk, my fingers still resting on the message. I had spent so long focused on my own pride, on fighting for my place in this world. But now, I saw what I had been blind to before. This wasn't about me anymore. This was about what I could give him. A chance to do things differently. A chance to make his own choices, to lead this company in a way that I couldn't. I had always thought the company was my legacy. But maybe, just maybe, my true legacy was in passing it on to him. Giving him the space to grow, to rise above the mistakes I made, to build something better. That was what mattered most. I stepped out of my office and walked down the hallway to his. He was there, sitting at his desk, his head down. The weight of the world on his shoulders, just as it had been on mine so many years ago. When he saw me, he didn't say anything at first. We just looked at each other, the silence stretching between us. And for a moment, I saw the boy I had raised, the one who had trusted me, the one who had wanted so badly to make me proud. But that boy was gone now, replaced by a man who had faced the consequences of his own choices and learned from them. "I've been thinking," I said, my voice steady but full of emotion. "About everything. About the company. About us." He nodded slowly, unsure where this conversation was going. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the anxiety of not knowing what I was going to say. "I've spent my life holding on to this," I continued, stepping closer to him, fighting for it. "But now, I realize something. It's not mine to keep forever. It's yours. If you want it." His eyes widened, surprise and uncertainty flashing across his face. "Dad, are you saying?" I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle in my chest. "I'm saying it's time for you to lead. It's time for me to step back. You've proven that you're capable. You've earned it." The room fell quiet, and for a moment, he didn't speak. He just stared at me, as if trying to make sense of what I was offering. Finally, he stood up, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I'm ready, but I want to try. I'll make it work. I'll do whatever it takes." I felt a rush of emotion, pride, relief, fear. But most of all, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had made my choice. It wasn't just about passing on the company. It was about passing on something much more important. The opportunity to rebuild, to grow, to lead. I walked out of the room, leaving him behind, but for the first time in years, I felt like I had made the right choice. The company was in good hands. And so was I. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the city as I sat on the back porch of the house we once shared, the house that now felt too quiet. It had been weeks since the decision had been made, since I had handed the company over to him, since I had finally stepped back, allowing my son to step forward. The breeze was gentle, soothing, but there was a heaviness in the air that I couldn't quite shake. The scars of betrayal were still there, etched deep into my mind. The pain of being pushed aside, of watching someone I had given everything to turn their back on me, was not something I could forget. The trust we once shared, the bond, had been shattered. But I had learned something during this journey. Something that wasn't about power or revenge, but about forgiveness. I had walked through the storm, fought for everything I believed in, and lost more than I had ever expected. And yet, here I was. Stronger, wiser, at peace, maybe not entirely, but enough to see the bigger picture. This was not the end. This was the beginning of something new. My son walked out to join me, his footsteps quiet on the gravel path. He stood next to me, but didn't say anything. Neither of us did. There was something unspoken between us, a shift that had happened. A quiet understanding that the road to rebuilding wasn't going to be easy. But we were finally on the right path. For so long, I had pushed him to become something he wasn't ready to be. I had expected more from him than he could give, and I had allowed that expectation to drive a wedge between us. But now, watching him stand there, his face no longer tense with anger or frustration, I could see how much he had changed. How much we had changed. "I know I hurt you," he said, his voice steady but soft. I didn't realize how much until everything started to fall apart. I didn't answer right away. The words he was saying weren't new to me. I had heard them in different forms before, and I had felt the weight of them. But there was something different this time. Something that told me he understood, truly understood, the gravity of what had happened between us. The hurt, the betrayal, the broken trust. They weren't just words anymore. They were part of the painful journey we had both gone through. "Some things, you can't take back," I said, my voice low. "The trust that's been broken, the pain we've caused each other, those scars will never fully fade. But that doesn't mean we can't move forward. It doesn't mean we can't rebuild." He nodded, his gaze meeting mine. There was a look in his eyes now that hadn't been there before, a mixture of understanding and remorse. I didn't need to say more. He knew what I meant. We both knew. This wasn't about fixing everything overnight. It was about trying, together, to heal what we could. The silence between us stretched on, but this time it didn't feel heavy. It felt like something shared, something we both needed to experience. A quiet acknowledgement that the past couldn't be changed, but the future was still ours to shape. I looked up at the sky, watching as the sun dipped lower on the horizon. The city below was still alive, but in that moment, everything felt still. Calm. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't consumed by the need to control, to fight. I wasn't consumed by the anger that had driven me for so long. I had done what I thought was necessary to protect myself, to protect the company, and to teach my son a lesson. But in the end, the lesson was for me, too. Revenge doesn't bring peace. Forgiveness does. I've spent too much of my life focused on what I had to lose, I said, the words coming easier now. But the truth is, what matters most isn't the company, or the power, or the pride. It's the people you love. It's the relationships you hold dear. And I'm ready to start rebuilding those. He stood beside me, and we both watched the sun set in silence. I could feel it then, the weight lifting. The burden of the past, the pain of betrayal. It was still there, but it no longer had the power it once did. It was just a part of our story. And like any story, it needed its closure. "Thanks," he said quietly, the word simple but laden with more meaning than anything he had ever said to me before. I looked at him, finally seeing him not as the boy I had tried to shape, but as the man he had become. The man who had learned from his mistakes, who had the courage to face his own demons. And in that moment, I realized that he was ready. Ready to lead, ready to rebuild. "Let's start over," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Together." And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I knew we'd walk it side by side. Have you ever been in a position where you had to choose between revenge and reconciliation? How do you think karma plays out in life? Share your thoughts in the comments, like, and subscribe for more stories. Thank you for watching.